Hey film fans, welcome to CinePro. Your ultimate hub for all movie recaps, from heartwarming classics to the latest blockbusters. Our movie starts with Wallace searching the internet for funny and awkward videos to show his friend Teddy while they're on their famous radio show. One time, a fan sends them a video of a teenager playing with a sword and accidentally cutting off his leg. Since then, the video becomes very famous and everyone in the world has seen it. Teddy talks about the incident and says he feels sorry for the teenager, but Wallace doesn't feel any sympathy and says that the teenager is now famous and has 30 million online views. During the radio show, they announce that Wallace will travel to the boy's location to interview him. Wallace speaks in a rude way and says he hopes that when he interviews the teenager, the boy won't cry over what happened to him. When Wallace travels to the teenager's house, he finds a flower on the doorstep and hears a wailing sound. He goes to the backyard and learns that the teenager's family is holding a mourning ceremony for the boy's death. He also finds out that the boy committed suicide with the sword because of the things Wallace and people around the world said about him. Wallace goes to a nearby bar and calls Teddy, saying he's upset that the boy couldn't wait 2 more days for the interview before killing himself. Wallace says he can't go back to his country without something to use for work, so he decides to interview someone else. He goes to the bathroom and sees an ad from a man offering free accommodation at his house in exchange for help with household chores. The man's name is Howard, who says he can't take care of himself because he's disabled and uses a wheelchair. Wallace is interested because Howard says in the ad that he'll share stories about his ocean adventures when he was young. Wallace decides to meet Howard at his house. On the way, Wallace goes to a supermarket and calls Howard to get the exact address. He asks 2 girls working there about the address Howard gave him, and they say it's 2 hours away. Wallace arrives at the address and meets Howard. They get to know each other, drink tea, and Howard asks Wallace why he's there, since Wallace doesn't want to stay at the house. Wallace says he came to hear about Howard's adventures to talk about them on his radio show. Howard tells his stories, saying that during World War II, he was with a man named Ernest, who was forbidden from joining the invasion forces and stayed on his ship in the ocean. Ernest was upset because he couldn't join the army and fight, so he went to the storeroom looking for alcohol. Howard worked there peeling potatoes and gave Ernest a bottle of alcohol. Howard shows Wallace the bottle and says it's just an old bottle, but it has a touching story when someone knows it. Wallace sees something hanging on the wall that looks like a stick, and Howard says it's a bone from a walrus. He says he loves walruses because they're the noblest animals on Earth. Wallace asks how Howard got the bone, and Howard says he once dealt with a walrus when he was lost at sea. He says the ship he was on crashed on the southern coast of Siberia in 1959 when they were exploring the Great White Shark. They couldn't find the shark because their ship hit an iceberg. After the ship sank, Howard was alone in the dark ocean, terrified, and dragged himself to a small island. He realized that a walrus had saved him. Howard says the walrus has huge tusks but is very gentle and kind. Howard decided to name the walrus with him Mr. Tusk, because Tusk means walrus tooth. He says he never had a friendship with a human stronger than his friendship with Mr. Tusk. As Howard continues telling his adventures, Wallace feels dizzy and suddenly collapses, losing consciousness. Howard looks at him and says, "Everything will be all right, Mr. Tusk." Wallace dreams of his girlfriend Ellie before his trip to Canada. She tried to stop him from going to make fun of the teenager who cut off his leg with the sword. Wallace told her the teenager asked him to do it, and he didn't want to make fun of the boy, but he had to for work. Ellie said the Wallace she fell in love with would never ruin a teenager's life. She asked to travel with him to Canada, but Wallace refused, saying she would distract him from work. When Wallace wakes up, he finds himself in a wheelchair. Howard is polishing a walrus tooth and tells Wallace he was scared when he saw him lose consciousness. Howard says it happened because a spider bit him. Wallace feels dizzy and asks Howard for his phone, but Howard says the doctor treating Wallace broke the phone. Wallace can't feel his leg, and Howard says it's because of the local anesthetic from the spider bite and the venom swelling his leg joint. Howard says the doctor had to amputate Wallace's leg to prevent the venom from spreading to his heart. Wallace lifts the cover from his leg and is shocked to find it's been amputated. He asks why he wasn't taken to the hospital. Howard says the doctor thought it was better for Wallace to recover at home because hospitals are full of diseases. Wallace doesn't believe Howard because nothing makes sense. He asks to speak to the doctor himself, but Howard says the doctor is busy and keeps telling his adventures. Wallace gets annoyed and says he's not interested in Howard's stories. He tries to get up from the wheelchair but realizes he's tied up. Howard laughs and says he's sorry for Wallace's condition. At night, Howard makes dinner and tells Wallace to eat with him, but Wallace can't even move his hand to hold the spoon. Howard says it's because of the anesthetic. Wallace starts to suspect there was never a spider involved. Howard teases him, saying spider, and when Wallace gets angry and says he wants to leave, Howard keeps teasing him with spider. Wallace is shocked to see Howard stand up from the wheelchair and move. Howard hits Wallace in the face, and Wallace screams for help. Howard returns to his wheelchair and says he's making a suit from walrus skin for Wallace to wear and act like a walrus. Wallace asks Howard why he's doing this. Howard says he wants to know if a human's heart is like a walrus's heart. Wallace screams for help, but Howard just screams with him. Meanwhile, Ellie is cheating on her boyfriend with another man. During the radio show before Wallace's trip to Canada, Teddy says he wants to take Ellie with him to an art event because Wallace isn't interested in art. When the program ends, he tells him that he wants to travel with him to Canada, but Wallace refuses because Ellie criticizes his work. He also feels that she wants to break up with him, even though she is charming. It turns out that Wallace was dreaming and remembering the past. He wakes up to the sound of his mobile ringing and moves with the wheelchair. He picks up the phone, but the call is disconnected. It turns out it was Ellie, and Wallace calls her back, but she doesn't answer. He leaves a voice message, speaking in a low voice, asking for help and telling her what happened to him, that Howard wants to turn him into an animal, and that he was afraid he'd never see her again. He apologizes for the way he spoke to her. At the same time, Teddy is at Ellie's house, and it turns out she's cheating on Wallace with him. Wallace sends Teddy a voice message, asking him to help as well. Howard notices and hits Wallace on the head, knocking him unconscious. He tells him that his life as a human is over and that he must live as a walrus if he wants to survive. The next morning, Ellie hears the voice message and learns what Wallace is going through. She wakes Teddy and lets him listen to the message. She takes Teddy's phone and finds that Wallace left him a message too. She tries to call Wallace, but he doesn't answer because Howard is operating on him. Howard tells Wallace it's good that someone is asking about him, and that the only one who cared for him in the past was Mr. Tusk. He tells him about his childhood, how his parents were killed, and he was sent to an orphanage. Later, he and the other orphans were transferred to a mental institution because the orphanage managers decided to register the orphans as mentally ill to get government funding. During the 5 years Howard spent in the institution, he was beaten and tortured every day. When he turned 15, he managed to escape and reach America. When Howard finishes the operation on Wallace's body, Wallace's arm is sewn to his side and his other leg is amputated. Teddy and Ellie are on their way to rescue Wallace and inform the police about what happened. Wallace is in an underwater room, wearing a walrus skin suit. Howard keeps reciting poetry when Wallace makes strange noises, treating him as Mr. Tusk and saying he missed the time they spent together after the shipwreck. Teddy and Ellie go to the travel agency and show Wallace's message to the staff to find out his location. When they reach the police station, they let the detective listen to Wallace's message, but the detective thinks they're playing a prank and finds it hard to believe. He calls a Canadian detective named Guy because there were bodies found with missing legs. He gives Teddy and Ellie Guy's number so they can contact him. Meanwhile, Howard continues his sadistic games with poor Wallace, dragging him into the water with chains to teach him to swim as a walrus. Wallace manages to swim for a short time but can't last long, so he sinks to the bottom and sees another human body. Howard did the same thing too. Teddy and Ellie meet Detective Guy, who has been trying to catch Howard for 10 years. He says Howard killed 23 people and that police found human skins around the places Howard had stayed, with the body's legs cut off and arms attached to the torso. He says he met Howard years ago when he was investigating the disappearance of a hockey player. When Guy was investigating, he visited Howard's house, and Howard asked him to kill a spider in the bathroom. Guy told him he wasn't there for that, but was looking for the missing hockey player, whose last known activity was an ad about a place to stay. Howard denied knowing anything. Afterward, Guy investigated Howard and found he had no records in the civil or criminal registry. Later, police found the hockey player's body in the pipes, and after that, Howard disappeared and Guy was fired from his job. Wallace keeps crying, and Howard asks why he's sad about losing his humanity. Howard says that during his travels, he discovered that humans are the most evil creatures. Howard throws a fish to Wallace to eat and closes the door, watching Wallace. When he sees Wallace eating the fish and adapting to being an animal, Howard is pleased and leaves him alone. Teddy, Ellie, and Guy arrive at the supermarket where Wallace had been. They ask the employees about him, and the girls say Wallace was writing an address in his notebook. Guy uses a pencil to shade the paper underneath the one Wallace wrote on and discovers the address. Howard is in the water, teaching Wallace how to swim. He says he killed and ate Mr. Tusk when he ran out of food on the island. When he was rescued, he saw Mr. Tusk's blood on his hands and regretted what he had done. He tells Wallace that Mr. Tusk couldn't defend himself last time, but this time it will be different. Guy finds Wallace's rental car sunk in a swamp. He gives guns to Ellie and Teddy in case Howard tries to hurt them. Howard puts on the walrus suit and tells Wallace to defend himself this time. Howard keeps attacking Wallace, who screams. Ellie hears Wallace's screams, runs, and enters the house. Howard removes his suit and goes to hit Wallace with a bone, but Wallace bites Howard's leg, knocks him down, and kills him. Teddy and Ellie arrive at the room where Wallace is and are shocked by his appearance. Guy points his gun at Wallace to end his suffering, but Ellie stops him, crying. A year later, Ellie and Teddy visit the zoo to see Wallace. Ellie calls for Wallace, but he doesn't come out of his hiding place. Teddy throws a fish in front of the hideout, and Wallace comes out and eats it. Teddy tells Ellie she doesn't have to visit Wallace. He tells her not to hide from them because they accept him as he is. When Wallace sees her crying, he remembers his days with her. Before leaving the zoo, Ellie tells Wallace she loves him, and Wallace cries and goes back into his hiding place. If you liked today's video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all new updates. See you in the next video.